Reddit revenge story.
My neighbor crossed the line, so I got the last laugh. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when I first noticed something odd. My wife, Lauren, seemed to be spending an unusual amount of time talking to our neighbor, Tom. At first, I didn't think much of it. Tom had always been friendly, and we'd often chat across the fence when doing yard work or having casual neighborhood get-togethers. But something about the way they interacted lately caught my attention. It was subtle, like an inside joke only the two of them shared. The kind of laughter I hadn't seen from Lauren in a long time. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions became more frequent. Lauren started disappearing at odd hours, with vague excuses about running errands or needing me time. I wanted to trust her, I really did. But suspicion gnawed at me, making me feel like there was something I was missing, something they weren't telling me. So one evening, while she was out running an errand, I decided to test my instincts. I walked over to Tom's house and saw a familiar car parked in his driveway. Lauren's. My stomach dropped. I had hoped I was wrong, but there it was. Undeniable proof that something was happening right under my nose. I didn't confront them,
Though, instead, I decided I needed more than just a glimpse of her car parked there. I wanted the truth in all its raw, unfiltered detail. That night, I started setting up small cameras in the house, ones that she wouldn't notice. I knew it was extreme, but my trust had already been broken. I needed to see for myself if she was
truly betraying me. Over the next few days, I gathered evidence. The footage confirmed my worst fears. Lauren was indeed sneaking over to Tom's house. Often while I was at work, seeing the images was painful. Each video file a punch to the gut. I watched her laugh, flirt, and act as though she were a different person with him. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. But rather than confront her in anger, I made a decision. I was going to get even, but I would do it carefully, methodically, and with the kind of precision that would leave her and Tom regretting every choice they'd made. First, I played the part of the unsuspecting husband. I acted like I had no idea what was going on, giving her no reason to suspect that I knew. Meanwhile, I started discreetly moving money out of our joint accounts, redirecting it into a personal account she had no access to.
Over the years, we'd saved a substantial amount, and I wasn't about to let her take half after what she'd done. Bit by bit, I moved funds, invested in assets under my name only, and protected everything I could. Then I went to work on our house. We both owned it, but I had been the one to handle all the renovations and upgrades. Over the years, I'd put in a lot of work, and I knew the property inside and out. With that knowledge, I started looking into a way to take it from her without her realizing what was happening. Lauren and I had planned to refinance the house to allow our monthly payments, something we discussed several times. So I used this as
my opportunity. I drafted the paperwork, explaining that it was for the refinancing, and made sure everything looked official. She barely skimmed it, trusting me as she always had, and signed her part. Little did she know, she was signing over her rights to the property. It took time, and I had to make sure every detail was in place, but it worked. I had complete control over the house, and she was none the wiser. The next phase of my plan involved Tom. I knew he prided himself on his reputation in the neighborhood.
he was always putting on a friendly face and helping others out. So I decided to hit him where it would hurt the most: his reputation. I'd overheard him bragging one day about some creative deductions he'd taken on his taxes, ones that were definitely questionable, if not outright illegal. So I made an anonymous tip to the IRS outlining exactly what I'd overheard. I had no proof, but my tip was enough to get him flagged for an. Over the next few months, I watched as Tom's friendly demeanor slowly dissolved under the stress of his financial investigation. Meanwhile, Lauren began to notice changes. The extra money we'd once had was gone, replaced with bills and notices about mortgage payments that she thought had been handled. She started to panic, questioning
Me about where the money had gone, why our finances were in such disarray. I told her I'd made a few bad investments, playing up the role of the irresponsible husband. I could see the frustration and fear growing in her, but I stayed calm, acting as though I was oblivious to her distress.
Finally, the day came when I was ready to make my move. I left Lauren a letter, detailing everything I knew. I told her about the cameras, the footage, and the lie she'd been living. I wrote about how her betrayal had affected me, how she'd shattered the life we'd built together, and that I was done. I told her I was leaving, that the house was legally mine, and that she was now solely responsible for the debt she'd unknowingly helped create. I left the letter on the kitchen counter and walked out. Knowing that the mess she'd made was now hers to deal with alone. As I drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had taken control, reclaimed my life, and left her to face the consequences of her actions. I'd set things up perfectly. She couldn't fight for the house, couldn't touch my finances, and would be dealing with the fallout of her own decisions for a long time. And Tom, well, his life was a mess too. Thanks to the IR's investigation, his friendly reputation had been tarnished, and he'd have to answer for the financial tricks he thought he'd gotten away with. In the end, I got the last laugh. I didn't have to yell, argue, or make a scene. I simply let them both fall into the traps they'd set for themselves. It was quiet, calculated, and everything I could have hoped for. I moved on, started fresh, and left them with the mess they'd created. This outline sets the foundation for the story's flow, with each part connecting smoothly for a satisfying revenge arc. The setup, build-up, and execution of the plan can be elaborated,
with more dialogue, internal reflections, and detailed scenes of how each part of the revenge plays out.
Let me know if you'd like further development of specific parts or additional emotional insights for each step.
It all started with a small feeling and nagging suspicion I couldn't shake. Lauren, my wife of 7 years, had been acting differently. She was spending more time with our neighbor Tom, under the pretense of helping him with renovations or giving advice on decorating. At first, I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my own insecurities, but there was something in the way she laughed around him, a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. One Saturday afternoon, I noticed Lauren getting ready to head over to Tom's house again. She was dressed up nothing too obvious, but enough to make me wonder as she left. I couldn't resist following
her. I kept my distance, making sure she didn't notice me.
When she walked up to Tom's door, she knocked and then glanced around, as if to check that no one was watching. The door opened, and there he was, grinning as he pulled her inside. My heart dropped. I felt like a fool. All this time, I had trusted her, believed in her. I wanted to barge in, to confront them right then and there, but
something stopped me. I realized that an angry confrontation would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt, of knowing they'd gotten to me. No, I couldn't give them that. Instead, I took a deep breath, turned around, and walked back home, my mind already spinning with plans. That night, I could barely sleep. I lay awake, going over everything I'd seen, replaying the moments in my head. The hurt was raw, a deep ache that gnawed at me. But as the hours passed, the anger turned into something else cold, calculated resolve. If she thought she could betray me, then she had no idea who she was dealing with. The next day, I started setting up small cameras around the house, hidden in places she wouldn't notice. I told myself it was for closure, that I needed concrete proof before making any decisions. Over the next few weeks, the footage confirmed my suspicions. I watched as she snuck over to Tom's place, their secret meetings unfolding on my screen. Each time I saw her with him, it felt like another knife in the heart. But I kept my emotions in check. This was bigger than my pain. I was planning something they would never forget. With the evidence in hand, I played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. I went about my daily routines, acting as if nothing was wrong. Lauren had no idea that I knew. In fact, she seemed more relaxed, even more brazen in her affair. I'd catch her glancing at her phone with a smirk, laughing at messages she kept hidden from me. But it was all part of my plan. I needed her to feel secure, to believe I was completely clueless. Over the years, Lauren and I had saved up a decent amount of money, with most of it in our joint accounts, so the first step was securing my finances. Bit by bit, I started transferring money into a separate account under my name, one she had no access to. I moved investments, redirected deposits, and quietly protected every penny I could. I knew she'd eventually realize something was wrong, but by then, it would be too late.
With the finances secure, I turned my attention to our home. We both owned it, but I'd been the one who handled all the paperwork, the renovations, and the upkeep. I knew the property inside and out, every document, every expense. Lauren and I had talked about refinancing the house to lower our monthly payments, and I decided to use
this as a way to gain control. One evening, I brought up the refinancing idea casually over dinner.
I'd been looking into refinancing the house, I said, keeping my tone light. It'll save us a lot on payments each month. All you need to do is sign a few documents. She barely glanced up, giving me a distracted nod. Sure, whatever you think is best. I drafted the paperwork, making sure everything looked official. She signed without reading, trusting me as she always had. Little did she know, she was signing over her rights to the property. It was legally mine now, and she didn't suspect a thing. Next, I set my sights on Tom. He was the kind of guy who thrived on his reputation, always putting on a friendly face for the neighbors. I knew from overhearing conversations that he'd taken some questionable deductions on his taxes, little tricks he thought no one would notice. So I made an anonymous tip to the IRS, detailing exactly what I knew. I had no concrete proof, but it was enough to put him on their radar. Over the next few months, I watched from afar as his life began to unravel under the stress of an audit. Meanwhile, Lauren started to notice changes. Our once comfortable finances were now in disarray, with bills piling up and late notices arriving in the mail. She confronted me one evening, her tone laced with frustration. "What's going on with our accounts, Matt?"
she demanded, waving a bill at my face. "Why are we behind on everything?"
I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral. "I made some investments that didn't pan out. Times are tough, Lauren. We'll have to cut back for a while." Her face twisted in annoyance, but there was also a hint of fear. She was starting to realize that things weren't as stable as she thought, but she had no idea of the full extent. I continued to play the role of the irresponsible husband, letting her believe I was the one to blame. Finally, the day came when I was ready to end it. I left Lauren a letter, detailing everything I knew. I described how I'd seen her with Tom, how I'd gathered the evidence, and how her betrayal had destroyed me. I told her that our marriage was over, that the house was legally mine, and that she was now responsible for the debt. I explained that I'd moved on and that she was on her own. As I walked out of the house, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had done everything carefully, methodically, and without a single argument. She would wake
up to the reality she'd created, with no one to blame but herself. I blocked her number, cut all TIs, and left her to face the consequences of her choices. As I drove away, I looked forward to a fresh start. Tom, meanwhile, was dealing with the fallout of his audit, his reputation in shambles. The neighborhood had heard whispers, and he was no longer the friendly guy everyone thought he was. Lauren and Tom had both lost everything they'd taken for granted, and I had moved on, free from the pain they'd caused. In the end, my revenge wasn't about yelling or making a scene. It was quiet, calculated, and deeply satisfying. I had reclaimed my life, leaving them to deal with the mess they'd created. I moved forward, finally at peace. Knowing I'd gotten the last laugh, I drove away from the house for the last time. I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. The years of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak were
behind me now. I had left a carefully crafted letter for Lauren, detailing the exact impact of her choices. She would wake up to a life that looked nothing like the one she had known. I had taken back my financial stability, my property, and most importantly, my self-respect.
The house was legally mine, and the debts, thanks to her carelessness, were now solely her burden to carry. The letter had been simple, but brutal in its honesty. I hadn't held back. I wrote,
"Lauren, I know. I've known for a long time. I saw you and Tom, the man I trusted as a neighbor, sharing what should have been ours. I've watched as you created a life built on lies and deceit, while you laughed with him and took my trust for granted. I prepared myself for this day. I built my own escape, my own way out. When you read this, I'll be gone. The house belongs to me now legally and completely. The bills, the debt, and the financial strain, they're all yours. Don't worry about calling me. I've blocked your number. You're on your own now, left with the life you created with him."
"This is my goodbye. You made your choice. Now you'll live with it, Matthew."
I left the letter on the kitchen counter, imagining the look on her face when she read it. She had always believed that I was naive, that I'd never suspect a thing. Little did she know, I'd been a step ahead of her every day, planning each move with quiet, calculated precision. As I drove to a new city, starting over felt surreal. I had let go of the anger, the need to confront, the urge to demand answers. There was peace in walking away on my own terms, leaving her to face the aftermath alone. I hadn't stopped there, though. I wanted to make sure her partner in betrayal, Tom, faced his own consequences. The anonymous tip to the IRS about his creative tax deductions had done the trick. Over the past few weeks, I'd watched him unravel under the pressure of an audit. His clean-cut reputation in the neighborhood had been tarnished, and the whispers about his finances were already circulating. I knew it would only get worse for him from there.
In the end, Lauren and Tom had been left with each other, both drowning in their own mess. I moved forward, free from the weight they'd placed on me, knowing they'd spent years dealing with the fallout of their own actions. A few days after leaving, I found myself in a quiet CAF in a new town, enjoying my first coffee in peace. I glanced out the window, watching people go by, each lost in their own worlds, unaware of the life-altering decisions that had just taken place for me. I took a deep breath, feeling the fresh start I'd longed for, and a small smile crept across my face. I had made it through. I had reclaimed my life, leaving the betrayal, lies, and deceit in the past. A few months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Lauren and Tom's lives were spiraling. She was struggling to keep up with the debt, the financial strain overwhelming her as she tried to maintain the lifestyle she'd once taken for granted. The IRS audit had hit Tom hard, and he was facing a financial mess he couldn't talk his way out of. The two of them were bound together by the very actions that had betrayed me. But by then, I was past caring. I had moved on, building a new life in a new city, unburdened by their choices. Every day felt lighter, filled with possibilities I hadn't imagined. I was free. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and sadness as I stepped away from the life I had built with Lauren. The letter I left on the kitchen counter replayed in my mind, every word carefully chosen to let her know exactly what her choices had cost us both. She would come home, expecting her comfortable life, only to find it in ruins. I'd written out everything, laying bare the betrayal, the lies, and the consequences she'd face alone. Lauren, I know about you and Tom. I've known for a long time. I trusted you, and you shattered that trust without a second thought. I watched you pretend, watched you carry on our life as if nothing had changed, while you secretly tore us apart. You took the life we built and threw it away for him. Today, I'm leaving, and with me, I am taking everything you took for granted. The house, the money, and your comfortable lifestyle are now gone. You signed the papers without even looking, trusting me the way I once trusted you. You're on your own now. Every bill, every debt, every dollar is yours to manage. I imagined her face when she read those lines. The shock, the disbelief. She'd realized just how much she had underestimated me. How thoroughly I had prepared for this moment. I didn't need to be there to witness her reaction. The letter was enough a final statement that would hit her harder than any confrontation ever could. As I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, grief for the life we could have had, and satisfaction in knowing I'd taken control. I thought back to all the late nights when she'd been running errands, or helping Tom. I had spent those nights feeling lost, questioning myself, wondering if I'd done something wrong. But now, I felt nothing but clarity. I had done everything right. I had trusted, loved, and committed myself to our marriage. She had taken all of that and thrown it away. Leaving Lauren wasn't just about escaping her betrayal. It was about reclaiming my own happiness, my own sense of... I knew that this would be a fresh start, a chance to rebuild on my own terms. A few days later, I settled into a small, quiet town far from the memories of my old life. I found a modest but cozy apartment and spent my first evening there unpacking, letting the peace and quiet sink in. For the first time in years, there were no secrets, no lies, no hidden agendas hanging over my head, just me, a fresh start, and a future that felt wide open. I walked down the street to a local CAF the next morning, ordering a coffee and sitting by the window, watching people walk by, going about their lives, felt comforting. I was no longer burdened by Lauren's choices or Tom's betrayal. I'd moved on, leaving them to face the fallout. As the weeks went by, I heard bits and pieces from mutual acquaintances. The rumor mill had done its job. Tom's creative tax deductions had caught up with him, thanks to the anonymous tip I'd sent to the IRS. His reputation in the neighborhood was ruined, his finances under scrutiny, and the pressure had started to show. Meanwhile, Lauren was struggling with the debt I'd left her with. She had tried to keep up appearances, but the cracks were starting to show. Every missed bill, every overdue payment weighed on her, a reminder of the comfortable life she'd lost. It was poetic justice. They betrayed me together, and now they were bound to each other by the consequences of their actions. Months later, I was sitting on my apartment balcony, watching the sunset, when I received a message from an old friend who still lived near Lauren. You wouldn't believe the mess Tom and Lauren are in. He's facing penalties, and she's barely scraping by. This karma really does come around to her. I read the message and felt a quiet satisfaction, but I also felt something else. Closure. I had already moved on. Their downfall was simply a byproduct of the choices they'd made. I had taken the high road, choosing to reclaim my life and find peace in a fresh start.
That was my real revenge, not anger, not bitterness, but the decision to live a life free from the pain they'd caused. The next morning, I put away the last mementos of my past with Lauren, clearing out any reminders of our old life together. I had rebuilt my finances, established my independence, and created a world where I was free to live on my own terms. There was a certain power in knowing I had taken control, that I had chosen my own path rather than allowing their betrayal to define me. Over time, I found new passions, new interests, and new friendships. Life moved forward, and I moved with it. The betrayal had left its mark, but it had also given me the strength to rebuild, to choose a life where respect, trust, and self-worth came first. Looking back, I realized that leaving Lauren had been the best decision I could have made. I had taken everything she valued and left her with the consequences of her own actions. But the real victory was in finding myself again, in living a life free from the lies and deceit. I had walked away with my dignity intact, and that was the ultimate revenge. As time passed, the pain of Lauren's betrayal faded, replaced by a newfound sense of strength and peace. I had walked away from a life that had been built on lies and deceit, leaving the past behind and focusing on a future that was entirely my own.
In my new town, I found a rhythm, a quiet, fulfilling life where every decision, every step, was mine alone.
I rented a small, sunlit apartment overlooking a park, with big windows that filled the rooms with warmth. It felt like a fresh start in every sense. Every morning, I'd sit by the window with my coffee, watching the world move around me, feeling as if I finally reclaimed my life. I took up new hobbies, met new people, and even
joined a hiking group, exploring trails I'd never thought to tackle before.
My old life felt like a distant memory, but from time to time, whispers of Lauren and Tom's situation would reach me through mutual acquaintances. Their lives had spiraled. Tom was dealing with a hefty penalty from the IRS audit, and his reputation in the neighborhood was ruined. Lauren, left with the debt she had unknowingly taken on, struggled to make ends meet. She had tried to maintain the lifestyle she'd once enjoyed, but without the shared finances we'd built together, it quickly became unsustainable.
People who had once seen them as the perfect neighbors began to view them differently. Their actions and the fallout became a reminder to everyone around them of what betrayal could cost.
But as for me, I didn't need their suffering to feel whole. I had already found my closure. Their hardships were just the inevitable consequences of their choices. I no longer felt anger or bitterness. Instead, I felt free, unburdened by the hurt I had once carried. My decision to walk away with my dignity intact had been my ultimate
revenge, and in finding my peace, I realized that I'd won. My life, filled with new experiences and genuine connections, was all the victory I needed.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of betrayal, resilience, and self-discovery.
If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more powerful stories like this.
What would you have done in Matthew's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Would you have confronted them immediately, or chosen to walk away and rebuild, just as he did?
Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about anger or retribution. It's about reclaiming your happiness, respecting yourself, and moving forward with dignity.
Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more stories that inspire strength, courage, and life's unexpected twists. Until next time, take care and always remember, happiness and self-respect, the ultimate forms of revenge. Subscribe for more unforgettable stories.
And stay safe.